Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and once again, I'm joined by Chaz. How you doing today, Chaz?
I'm doing well. How are you, Seth?
I'm doing well, ready to talk even more Kaladesh. Today, we have our top 5 black cards from Kaladesh. So again, in case you missed the earlier ones, doing things a little different for set reviews. Instead of doing every card, we're focusing on the 5 best cards and maybe some honorable mentions here or there. So today is Black Day, and let's jump right into it. Coming in at number 5 on our list, we have a mythic rare, Demon of Dark Schemes. So Chaz, what do you think about the Energy Demon?
Yeah, so we felt like this was a good way to start things off. And like we've said in previous videos, we wanted to at least touch on all the mythics. So we felt that this is kind of a great way to come in at number 5 since it is a mythic, even if we're not super excited about it. We did talk about it on the podcast, but the caveat here is that we didn't really know how energy would play out for the second ability on Demon of Dark Schemes. I'm feeling at least a little bit better about that. But honestly, the downside here is that the demon doesn't really deal with anything in standard to warrant being very heavily black, or, the black casting cost rather. And it is 6 mana, and it just doesn't deal with key cards like Spell Queller. It doesn't deal with Sylvan Advocate. So if it's not dealing with like 2 and 3 drops at this point, like I don't see the reason to be investing so much into this card. If Kaladesh block was a thing, like if we were still worried about block constructed, then maybe this would be a little bit better when it's wiping out servos and the like. But I'm not hugely positive on this demon.
Yeah, I think for me, this is a maybe after next rotation type card. I think right now, I don't think it matches up well with the format, but that doesn't mean we couldn't end up with a format where it matches up pretty well at some point in the next 18 months while it's legal. Right now, I think the way this could see play is in a deck where you're kind of ignoring the -2/-2 ability and wanting to reanimate things. If you're naturally making energy in other ways, a 5/5 that's pay 2 and a black to reanimate something is actually a pretty good deal. So maybe there could be a deck that took advantage of that aspect. But right now, I'm not excited about it because it's a Massacre Worm that isn't in a format that lines up well with a Massacre Worm ability.
Right. Exactly. I mean, like you said, the ability is actually a lot of upside on this creature, and it's a pretty good deal, like you said. The unfortunate thing is, I don't know even how much energy it will be able to provide. So we're looking at if you already had the energy to use the ability. So that's just a dynamic that we're going to have to watch going forward. And yeah, you're right. In a world where maybe humans or dwarven artifact aggro is like a thing in the next 18 months, like you said, with Toolcraft Exemplar, those are the kinds of cards it can deal with. But when you're looking at Spell Queller and Sylvan Advocate still sticking around for quite some time, then it doesn't look as great.
All right, moving on to number 4 on our list. This is a card that I'm actually really excited for across formats. We have Lost Legacy. So this is sort of a infinite obliteration is one comparison, or cranial extraction. What do you think about this one, Chaz?
Yeah, so we've come a long way from Cranial Extraction, and I actually had the joy of playing that card when it was in Standard back in Kanamigawa. So to me, you say farewell to Cranial Extraction, and you look at Lost Legacy, and this is a really good, very competitively costed way of dealing with these kind of way to have this effect. Now understand they have the upside of drawing a card maybe, but you don't see this ability too often, especially at a very aggressive casting cost.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Infinite Obliteration see play as an answer to Emeralds and things like that. But one thing Infinite Obliteration can't do is, and this might not be as relevant for Standard, although we'll see what decks develop, if we have a paradoxical outcome combo deck that really relies on that to win, Lost Legacy can hit that too. It can hit Scape Shift, for example, in Modern, along with hitting Primeval Titan, and we have cards that can do that, like Slaughter Games, Cranial Extraction, but they're always 4 mana, so having it a turn quicker can actually be pretty relevant. I've definitely seen Scapeshift decks that are playing Primeval Titan quicker than you can cast a Slaughter Games or Cranial Extraction, when if you can get rid of all the Primeval Titans, that deck's going to have a much harder time winning the game because they're so dependent on it. So I think it has a chance. Another thing people have brought up, and this is probably Magical Christmas Land, but you can also target yourself and grab all your Eternal Scourges and put them in your exile zone, so you can kind of draw 4 Eternal Scourges and cast them from exile, but you're still just getting 3/3s, so I don't know if that's something you could actually build a deck around in Standard or not.
Hey, I like it. I think that could be pretty spicy.
All right, number 3 on our list, and this one I think you're more excited about than me. Gonti, Lord of Luxury, an Etherborn rogue. So, Chaz, since you like this one, take it away.
Yeah, I think we're both kind of excited for this card. I just think it needed to be higher up on this list because outside the Commander and EDH obvious appeal here, where you can really build a deck around Gonti, whether it be in your 99 or as a Commander. I'll let Tomer exaggerate on that. But I think the effect for 4 mana is actually pretty good. We really don't see just a straight up value trigger like this on many creatures, especially at this low of a cost. You look at 4, it might not seem low, but for this type of effect, that seems great return on a 4 mana card, especially when it's attached to a 2/3 with Death Touch. I don't know if it's immediately going to impact Standard, but I think it has merit to show up here and there as a value creature that you can also abuse the Enter the Battlefield ability with creatures like Eldrazi Displacer and the like.
Yeah, I think it could show up in Standard. One thing it has going for it is we were talking about how Demon doesn't line up well with the format. A 2/3 with Death Touch is actually pretty good against Sylvan Advocates, Reflector Mages. It stonewalls them all day and actually trades up with them in some sense because of Death Touch. So in the worst case, you should be able to kill it. The downside is 3 toughness means Incendiary Flow gets it, for example. It makes it a little bit fragile, but you can get a lot of value out of it depending on the matchup. In the worst case, it's a 4 mana 2/3 Death Touch that draws you a card to some extent, which isn't that bad. So I think there's a chance that it shows up here and there, probably more like a 1 of, maybe a 2 of at the most, but it's a really cool card and unique effect, so I think it deserves a place on our list just because of that.
Yeah, and I think people have to realize, if they haven't already, Gonti doesn't actually need to be on the battlefield for you to still reap the benefits of the ability, the last part of the ability. As long as the card is exiled, you can cast it at any point.
Number 2 on our list, and this is another one where we kind of debated the top of the list. On my personal list, I had these reversed with number 2 at number 1, but Chaz talked me into switching them. So number 2, another Gear Hulk, Noxious Gear Hulk, but Menace, Chaz.
But Menace, we got there, said the Menace Hulk. I don't know why this card has Menace, but that's an ongoing debate on the Goldfish podcast as to why creatures have Menace. It's unfortunate that we don't have Fear anymore, but yeah, Noxious Gear Hulk I feel is again another strong card in the Gear Hulk cycle. It does deal with basically every creature in Standard and stabilizes you for doing it. So I like the Magical Christmas Land of ripping this off the top, Lewis Scott Vargas style, and dealing with your opponent's Emrakul and gaining 13, and now having a 5/4 Menace ability. For much as we don't like Menace, it is an upside, at least on the Gear Hulk. They don't just throw a 5/4 with... They don't just throw Death Touch on a huge creature, because that's honestly not even beneficial. But I like the fact that this is a pretty good threat, can deal with opposing Planeswalkers because they might not have blockers. So it really does it all. And I really do think it can kind of carve itself into Standard as a top end for a mid-range list. Especially we go back to being able to take advantage of the Enters the Battlefield ability with Blink effects.
Yeah, and it's a 2-for-1 on a stick, which is super powerful. I think we had... Oh, man, I can't think of the name now. What was the elf that had the weird kill something if power and toughness weren't equal?
Gilt Leaf Winnower.
And that's seen a bit of play, mostly in sideboards, but it has shown up, and this is so much better because it
Yeah.
hits everything. And the life gain almost makes me view it as a reverse Thrag Tusk. Instead of getting an extra token, you're gaining that life and getting rid of one of your opponent's creatures, so you still have that 2-for-1 built into it with the life gain. So I think this card is really powerful and expect it to see a lot of play in mid-range and potentially control decks as well, because it's a great stabilization card. It's one of those cards where you just live and live and live, and once you resolve this, you gain a bunch of life, get a big body, and potentially use it to close out the game. So in my book, this is at the top of the heap as far as Gear Hulks are concerned.
Yeah, it's certainly up there. I think this is going to have a great path of success. To success, rather.
Well, number one on our list, we're going to the opposite end of the scale. We got a 2-drop. We have Syndicate Trafficker. So, Chaz, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it was a real discussion to have this 2-drop rare beat out the kind of premier mythic here in this color. But the more I thought about the Trafficker, the more I liked it. And it kind of brings me back. People may compare this to a similar comparison to Falkenrath Aristocrat. And while it's not Falkenrath Aristocrat by any stretch, it is really powerful. It does have a lot of play within Kaladesh, just getting rid of these little servo artifacts, all the while making it not susceptible to removal or board wipes like Fumigate, and it retains the counters. So I think it's really strong. Even on curve, you can just drop it as a 2-mana 3/1, not have to deal with it. And later on in the game, you kind of look at this as a kind of a higher converted mana cost drop that you just leave the 1-up to kind of protect it from any kind of removal. And I think it can open up some interesting deck building archetypes where we look at the Aristocrats style lists again. Maybe that starts to happen, or like white-black tokens along with Gideon, or the white card, the uncommon from Kaladesh that gives you 2 servos, similar to Raise the Alarm. So there's a lot of different things that are going well for this card.
For a 2-drop, it is super powerful. Being able to be a 2-drop that in the late game can just dominate the board and survives a good percentage of removal. So I really like that aspect of Syndicate Trafficker. My one concern is we just don't know what Kaladesh Standard is going to look like. How many artifacts are seeing play? How many sackable artifacts are seeing play? The tools are there. The cards are there. Does someone figure out a build that can really take advantage of this? And if they do, this could end up being the standard, the next Sylvan Advocate, or the next Tarmogoyf, like the dominant 2-drop in standard in the right deck, I think. It has that amount of power. The question is, can someone find the build to make it realize its potential?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is a low-cost investment to play the cards that you likely are already going to be playing anyway. And it kind of shields creature removal spells. It, like I said, it basically, as long as you have 1 mana up, a couple artifacts, you're basically locked in for a value creature. And this just gets progressively better as the game goes on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2-drop that's fine on turn 2 and potentially dominant on turn 6 or 7. So cards like that have a lot of potential. It offers that flexibility you want to see from constructed cards. So I really like that aspect of it.
Yep.
And that has been our top 5 black cards from Kaladesh. So we'll be back tomorrow with another color. Chaz, thanks for hanging out. It was a blast. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, it was really fun. We will see you all tomorrow.